So I think the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go opposite sides, aren't we?
We are.
Because the little booth there is not really big enough for two.
No.
So we've heard some really big stuff today, some big ideas, a lot about the cloud, a lot about the digital. Jeff talked about his themes. I think what we're going to try and do now, just before lunch, is kind of bring that right down. We're quite a small unitary. Sally's going to talk a bit about Wokingham in a minute. And we've done some stuff here around some of these things. And we're right on the cusp, perhaps, of going through a big change for our organisation. And we're going to talk to you a bit about that today. Not in a way that says we think we've done it all, or we know all the answers, but we're going to talk to you about our thinking there, some of the issues we've had with that, some of the successes. And I think at the end, if we can kind of have a bit of a contract at the end here between us and yourselves, what we're going to do is try and have a bit of a discussion, open up a bit of a discussion about that. Because we did an event before, and really we kind of did a bit of PowerPoint, stuff like that, but what really got going was when we got a kind of conversation going. So we're going to talk a bit about what we've done, and then we're going to open up that conversation. So Sally, do you want to talk a bit about Wokingham?
So at Wokingham, we've got over 160,000 residents. And for us, it's over 80% are owner-occupiers, which kind of sets the scene for where we are in the Thames Valley. We've got a really strong regional economy, which is dominated for us around IT. So for our partners at Microsoft and for Oracle, they pay us business rates, which is unusual for us to have Microsoft as a customer. So back in 2014, we started at Wokingham on a journey around our customer experience, really looking to make that kind of customer, the customer at the heart of everything we do, really make our customer centric to our organisation. And what we did at that time was really a lot of the traditional things that local authorities would do. So we looked at improving our telephony, getting out there on our web chat, trying to bring together those kind of channels of areas and expertise that we could start to do more at the first point of contact. For us, in addition to that, we invested really heavily in the Microsoft platform. So that replaced one of our legacy CRM solutions, which it was really interesting to see earlier how CRM used to just exist in the contact centre. And for us, we were in exactly the same position. So we invested in Microsoft Dynamics at that point, and ADX Studio for our customer portal. And for us, that investment was significant because it opened up some real opportunities to start to bring that customer experience into the 21st century, to start using some of that product set that would narrow that digital divide. And I think, again, that really leans into the themes that we've heard other people talk about today. Often when you're at home and you're on your Amazon or you're using Ocado, and then you go into work in a local government environment and you're picking up a legacy application that's 25 years old that just can't integrate, and that's actually reality. So part of that kind of customer experience was trying to rip out some of those old products and really do something different with that new product set. I think anybody who's kind of been involved in a program like that will understand what I say when you hit those kind of silos. So actually the services that we have within the council are often built around that individual service and not around the customer. So actually trying to make those changes in those silos was really difficult. And actually what we were actually encountering were the need to battle at every point to try and get people to understand what we were doing and why. I think in addition to that, the historic budget structures around how a council has grown up organically just doesn't lend itself to needing to change and to shape and to grow in that way. And finally, because we were really keen to use the ADX Studio portal for us to create that My Account, so a customer could log on to our website and actually get personalised information that was proactive, not just dealing with that request it or report it, but actually really to be intelligent and to understand what they'd done before and what are the services that might interest them. So part of that was really pushing the business to think about making sure they had SLAs. And actually that was, while you would think that's normal, it is in IT. It's not really normal in some other services. So for other areas, we had to really sit down and push the need to be able to put service level agreements out there, so we could have that kind of transparent, real approach to service delivery, so customers can have that track it. Where is my Domino's pizza effect? Really, alongside where is my pothole being refilled? So that kind of same digital channel. In addition to that, at the same time, our department was also doing a whole-scale change around IT, which
Yeah,
Matt will
so
tell you a bit about.
alongside our customer program, we're also doing some stuff with our IT. We had an opportunity. We coming to the end of an outsourced IT contract. We had an opportunity there to reshape stuff. We should name check Mike, I think, at this point, because both Sally and I worked for Mike, and Mike was at Wokingham before he went to Ealing. And really, this kind of was his idea, but a really good idea, because what we did was, rather than do the thing that lots of local authorities might have done at that point, which is like, okay, we're coming to the end of a contract, let's retender that contract. We took a whole kind of rethink about what we wanted to do with our kind of technology, and we came up with this kind of mixed economy idea. We thought, well, do we really want to be managing people or managing infrastructure ourselves, that sort of thing? Is that what we want to do? And the answer to that was no. We should use the cloud for that. We should invest in the cloud for that. But what we should do is kind of in-source the people that can make changes to technology and realize that benefit by working back to the business. It's kind of the beginnings of the thinkings that Jeff was talking about today, about being close to the business, being part of the business. And we'll talk a bit about how we've managed to get right into the business in a little while. So what we did was move to Office 365, put a lot of our applications in Azure. We had CRM online. We started that journey into that Microsoft product set. And we also then in-sourced some of the staff that we needed to have kind of control and be kind of agile in what we wanted to do with our technology. That took us about a year, and it was, I'll try to say, it's like an earache, I think, is probably a good term to say that. It wasn't an easy journey. We had some difficult times, but we achieved it. And it also, at that point in time, our organisation was looking at saving money in IT, and we saved a significant amount of money, close to £500,000, which is a lot for Wokingham, because we're quite a small organisation. So if you kind of think of those two journeys that we kind of went on, that kind of customer journey and the IT journey, in a way that kind of gave us a kind of some building blocks. But it wasn't enough. In the same way as Jeff talked earlier on about, okay, we've got to do some of these basics, but actually it's not enough. Where we are now and our thinking about how we change the whole organisation, this really did give us some firm foundations. But we'll talk about that a bit now.
So, as Matt alluded to, there was a real push as within all local authorities at the moment to make those savings. And for us as an authority, we've got some good achievements. You know, we've saved 30 million since 2012. That's not insignificant for a small unitary authority. But we've got a significant savings challenge really over the next 3 years. And for us, the real message that we were pushing back to our chief exec was that we couldn't live with that continuing salami slicing. And that's not just within the IT department or customer services, it was across the board. Because actually what you do when you constantly offer up those savings is that your ability to become flexible, ability to meet the demands of our changing customers is really, really difficult. And again, I've got that at the bottom about the changing customer demands, and that's where a customer for us is expecting us to be able to work differently. They don't want to have to come into the office. In fact, they get really frustrated if they ask to come and see us. They want to be able to transact with us online, or they want to be able to go to one of our locality offices, etc., etc. So for us, whilst we got that customer program underway and we were able to change out in partnership with Shaping Cloud and move to Azure and Office 365, and that was brilliant for us. But actually what it didn't do was make that wholesale transformation that actually we absolutely have to make to continue to be able to make those savings, to maintain that kind of level of service that we absolutely need to, especially for our adults and children's services. we need to be able to do something on a much bigger scale.
So-
But what the Microsoft platform really gave to us was the opportunity to be able to do some of that thinking.
So we only got yay far, but we were quite lucky in that Derek asked you about our chief exec and said, or chief execs, which one of you has digital, their chief exec as their top priority? No one put their hand up. We didn't put our hand up, but I reckon it's in his top 3, which is pretty good. Because what we did was starting to look at a model of a council and how that could be different. But it was about how that could be different, how we could work differently, but digital was an absolute key part to that. And we'll talk about that in a bit more detail in a little while. But I think what we'll do is talk through this model, because council has been through a process. It worked with a partner who had a model, and we've gone through a whole process of building a business case for a whole change to the council. And from a business point of view, we kind of took a model, we started mapping activities that people were doing around the organisation. We spent a lot of time thinking about that and testing that model out. And this is what we've kind of come up with. And the big thinking around the business model is no more departments, no more vertical, no more teams, all of that gone. Tip the model on the side and start thinking about functional groups. Now, Sally will probably talk about some of the principles behind that, but that is a big change. For a lot of people in our organisation, that's quite a scary thing, and it's been quite difficult to kind of talk it into existence and have all those difficult conversations about that change.
So as Matt said, it really is something different. Certainly I've worked at a couple of local authorities, and the idea of bringing something like this in, which is actually saying, hey guys, there's no more housing department, there's no more property services, just to be fair, kind of freaked people out a fair bit, which I think is fine because it's really different. And actually, if you're doing true transformation, you need something that actually makes people stop and think. And so actually, it's not just salami slicing, it's not putting a nice technology shiny front end on. Actually, we're going to transform our business from the back office type function first, then back out to the customer. Because it's only when we get our own house in order can we really start to offer some of those really slick customer service processes. So part of what we're doing here, especially around support services, what we're doing first, is looking at how we can withdraw some of that parental support. And I think anybody who's worked in that environment, you run a service desk with an IT, you have a HR service desk, and people call it because it's there. So some of the changes we're really trying to do is to push self-serve for our customers, absolutely, because there's a lot to be saved there, but also to push self-serve internally. Why do we force our customers down that self-serve route, or really push it and champion it? But internally, we call each other, we go and visit each other to try and get that answer. When actually what we should be doing is putting the right information out there in the right way, at the right time, to make sure that our customers, both internal and external, can start to help themselves. So again, part of this new model as well is looking to do much more within that customer service sphere. So we talk about doing more at first point of contact, but that only really happens if you've got the right information at the right time. In addition to that, we want to try and standardise some of those rule-based processes and really keep our specialist. Those people who have qualified for years or trained for years are actually, when you look at what they do day in, day out, maybe 45% of that is true specialist work, and that has to change for us really to make that shift from a standard local authority into something different. And it's really interesting when you get down and dirty with some of this model of how many people think what they do is a specialist piece of work. That's a bit of an eye-opener. And actually it's having to re-engage with our business to say, these are the people who we would say are specialist, this is what we would consider casework, and this is our customer experience, getting it right first time. And I suppose the really overlaying thing for me was that strategy and commissioning layer. Actually having a single brain around the organisation that looks at those strategies, looks at those policies, and can start constructing, as you would in the private sector, how we will operate as a business. And to match that, our community enable and our customer front end will be as slick as possible, and making the most of that kind of investment in technology that we've got already kind of in situ at Wokingham, or in the cloud as it is for us.
So we'll talk a bit about the technology in a minute, because there's a big investment in technology to support this. But it is really useful, I think, just to take a bit of time to think about how big a difference that is, because we've been involved in lots of workshops where we've been testing out the model across the organisation, and there's been some really difficult conversations at some of those workshops. So instead of just going and looking at a process and saying, okay, how can we make this a bit more efficient? We would always start that conversation with, what process do you do? What processes do you do? And what can we not do? What can we ditch completely? And being really kind of tough with that. Certainly in our support services, that's been a big challenge. Certainly around how much financial checking and regulation that we have in the organisation and how people feel that's important, we're kind of stripping a lot of that out. But even when you look down at something like a simple household application process, when we sat down and used the model to kind of really look at that process and how we could kind of push it right into technology, using workflow, right to the front, kind of self-serve, actually the role for the specialist got really quite small in that. Some really heated arguments about does a specialist need to go out and make a site visit and check around a simple household application. Some real heated conversations about that. Could someone just go out and, who's a locality worker, just go out and take some photos, for instance? You know, could that be the way forward? So there's some real kind of difficult stuff in some of that, and a real kind of tension in the organisation about that at the moment. So that's the model.
And then I suppose it's worth discussing the journey that we went through within IT to really start to understand what we know about our technology stack. So part of this process, working with the consultancy group, they helped us. They gave us, well, to be fair, they gave us a set of tasks and told us to lock ourselves away and step through it. What we needed to do, because we just brought IT back in-house, is really get a good handle for what we had, and start to rag those systems against a set of criteria that for us would make sure that those IT products were future-proofed. So they weren't just good enough for now, but actually there was something that we would use in the future. And that was a really kind of detailed piece of work for us.
And we're not really finished, are we? We're kind of
No,
just about here.
we're in the middle.
In
yeah,
between
the two.
there.
Yeah.
Mostly what we've done. But that's the process we went through, looking at each of our kind of technologies, what we're going to need for the future, is it fit for purpose, where are we going to go with that, what investment we might need for that. And that's kind of built our business case for our transformation. And the business case is getting through the final legs of its approval, should be approved at the end of the month. But it really does stack up for Wokingham. The investment and the payback in the revenue reduction pays back in the first 12 months. It really does pay out. And it's a big chunk of what the council needs to do to deal with its funding reduction going forward. It's sort of about 75% of that.
And it's really interesting for us from an IT perspective, certainly from a digital perspective, when we had that kind of middle band there, when it talks about talking with potential technology suppliers. And it's really interesting when you work with some of the big suppliers out there at the moment and say, actually, guys, we're not going to have a department. We want to have this big file system where we're going to have open data by default where we can. It really kind of, it blew their mind as well, because we were asking for something that actually, for those traditional suppliers, they just hadn't delivered before. And so I think not only did we go on a journey, as Matt and I, going from a traditional IT department where you have shed loads of 115 back office applications, because that's how we roll, into something completely different where you're asking suppliers to step out of their comfort zone. So I think those suppliers have come on a journey with us, so very interesting.
Yeah, and to kind of give an idea, that 115 in the back office there, we're looking to reduce that to 30 in our first kind of wave of implementation. So what we had, I mean, if you can imagine that model that we just showed before, what we've got is a kind of technology spine. So the process that we just took everybody through is the process by which we built our business case against looking at each of these blocks, because we reckon these things here, these blocks of technology, were the things that we needed to kind of underpin that model. If we're going for that automation, that integration, that simplification of process and technology to deliver that business change, we reckon that this model here, this technology model here, will kind of support that. There's probably some things missing from there. There's no data word in there, which probably should be in there. And we do need to think about how people consume their consume applications and when they're out and about, what devices they use too. But this was definitely what we thought was the kind of key elements to that. And really key for Wokingham is its investments in Dynamics. We use Dynamics 2016 Online, and really that sits through the heart of what we do. ADX is our customer portal, that sits right into Dynamics. Dynamics and the workflow will be used by many, many more people in the organisation as part of that. In fact, we think 60% of our business applications will be consumed into Dynamics as part of this business change, not as part of what we want to do as technology. We just think that's a natural step for how that should work, because that's the way people will work at Wokingham. Sally, do you want to talk about document management? Or?
So again, at Wokingham, when we were assessing our application lists, Matt and I were recently in post, and we looked at a number of applications we had, and from a document management perspective, we had not one but 4 document management systems. So immediately for us, that flagged as a red on a RAG status.
I think it was 5.
No, it's 4. 4.5, maybe, if you class file system. We do round quite a lot of work, so So along with our document management system, we had a scattergun approach to scanning, and again, that's pretty similar across the board. So you'll have a number of people scanning in lots of different ways, on lots of different technology, in lots of different departments, at different levels of the organisation. And really, if you take it back to that model and saying we're trying to make sure that the right people are doing the right thing at the right time, it made sense to us to immediately start to look to outsource that scanning really and print service to a supplier, which is what we're embarking on at the moment. In addition to that, we were lacking around a mobile solution. I would probably say we were confused, because we had a lot of departments with a lot of line of business systems that also offered lots of different types of mobile working. What we didn't have, or what we hadn't settled on, was this is how we do it around here. And part of that kind of process was understanding who we are, what we're going to do now, but also what we're going to do in the future, and how do we make sure that the technology that we choose right now will see us through not just 2-3 years away, but 5, 6, 7 years away into the future. Part of that journey was working with Microsoft, obviously at their office in Reading.
Yeah, I think as we went through the process, what kind of naturally fell out of that was a lot of our kind of legacy system suppliers just couldn't get what we were trying to do. Their technology couldn't do it. They couldn't think the way we wanted them to think. And even if they could get past that, their business model was kind of predicated on the fact that it didn't do what we wanted it to do. It did something else. It did like every little team this way, and you buy services that way, and that's how you do things. What we did though is naturally we came close to some other partners who were kind of saying, well, yeah, we kind of get what you're trying to do, and actually here's some other technologies that can help you with that, or here's a way of helping you with that implementation. And one of the biggest, perhaps, light bulb moments for us was we kind of used Office 365. We got a lot of stuff up to Azure on infrastructure as a service. We had Dynamics kind of in our contact center, a little bit more. We got kind of suppliers using that. But when we had a look at that whole Microsoft stack and that whole journey kind of that Derek was talking about, we realized that there was a whole kind of powerful possibility for us to kind of really use that cloud technology to drive what we're doing across the organization. And I have to be honest, there isn't a day that goes by where we don't discover something new and think, oh gosh, yeah, we could have done it, we should have done it that way, or we should have been thinking about that. And really that for councils is a big problem at the moment. It's one of the things that we talk about a lot. We've got a program that's got delivery dates. We've got people moving into restructured organization with new processes. At what point do you say, well, I think that technology is good enough, because it's changing all the time? However, we do have the benefit of that Microsoft stack in that we can get those benefits when they come online. So it's just about when we jump and when we take some of those things into the organization. Yesterday we were looking at SharePoint and how SharePoint could kind of bring a whole kind of workspace kind of experience to our organization, doing away with network drives, bringing all our business apps, bringing 365 into that so that people work in one way. And we were kind of like, oh, wow, this is great. Maybe we can look at some of that. I think this can really support what we're trying to do. But we've got that whole decision about, are people ready for that at the beginning of an implementation? Maybe that should come a bit longer, a bit later in our journey. But really, this whole stack was it was a light bulb moment, because if you kind of turn that on its side, it sits right over our model and how that works. Do you want to talk about Dynamics?
Yeah, so for us, the reason we were at the Microsoft offices is we've been working with Andy and Dom from Shaping Cloud, really kind of talking through this journey that we were going on from a transformation perspective. And they arranged a session at the Microsoft offices which allowed us to talk it through, not just with ourselves, which we have been doing, but with other partners, where we could really start to brainstorm ideas with partners that we felt were able to think outside that box. And really for us around Dynamics, traditionally we would use it within the contact centre, because that's local government, and you would try and negotiate with people. It was said earlier, one of the biggest skills around digital is actually being an influencer, and I absolutely agree. It's been able to go out there and cajole people into getting rid of their traditional 25-year-old product and go into something different. And the way we've managed that at Wokingham, whilst there's been quite a lot of carrot and stick and a lot of stick, I think what we've also done in addition to that is really been able to demonstrate, to show those services that Dynamics can do what they need it to do. To really sit down and say, just talk to me about what you need to run your business. And then go through and say, what must it do? What is your absolute critical system requirement that you need? And then to be able to say, we've done that, this is how that works. We've done that, and really give them tangible examples. That way we're bringing the business with us. We're absolutely not doing two departments, because that doesn't help us within IT or customer services. It's about being that kind of digital engagement partner, really, and being able to work with businesses and to understand their concerns, but also to be really to show them tangible examples of where we can make a massive difference with Dynamics. And as Matt said, in some areas we've had the permission and the ability for us to be able to go out and work with contractors. We outsource a number of our functions at Wokingham. So for us, we're working with Veolia. Their guys are now using Dynamics, and it's brilliant. I'm going to talk very low level. You report a missed bin, that goes through, doesn't come to us in customer services. We don't even see it. It goes directly to the contractor, and actually it's not a missed bin because it might have been contaminated. They select from a drop down if it's been contaminated, and it texts the customer saying, we're sorry, on this occasion it wasn't collected because of X. If it was a missed bin, it will text them and say, we're sorry, we're on our way. And that kind of service stops that level of failure demand. Anybody who's dealt with any of those kind of big suppliers in your own personal lives, when you get that radio silence, it breaks that trust. And actually, what we must do within local government is to kind of develop that trust where customers understand when we say we're going to get back to them, we will. And actually, it's not about someone sitting over a keyboard and getting ready to type. It's automated. Dynamics is clever enough for us to be able to fire out those SMS updates, those email updates in a way that suits our customer. And that's a big driver for us.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is where, rather than us talk through any more about some of the things we've learned and what's been difficult, I think this is the time when we're going to invite questions, try and get a bit of a kind of conversation going. As we're moving towards lunch, let's see if we can just squeeze out a bit more energy before lunch. So, anybody got any strong feelings or thoughts? Jeff?
I was really interested and encouraged to see your demand management function and your structure.
Mm.
I think that's really important to be clear about switching off that demand where you can. I was also reflecting on the scanning function. The guy who's scanning is cost of failure. But if it all came electronically in the first place, he wouldn't have to do any scanning.
Absolutely.
Yeah, agreed.
Those do two different functions.
Yeah,
demand management and the
Yeah.
things coming to you on paper.
Yeah.
Can, work together.
Absolutely, and that's been tricky for us when we're negotiating the commercial aspect, because really you want a sliding scale. You don't want it creeping up, you want the ability to be able to turn off that tap. Because we do recognise that as we get better, as we get smarter and slicker, then I would absolutely expect the paper element of the council not to go completely, because I don't think, but to certainly to shrink for us.
For sure. Hi.
I was just curious when you mentioned there isn't anymore need looking vertical and no more teams.
Mm.
There is a focus on the on function areas.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know how that data ownership or the collaboration between teams, as is currently it's in many places, is more when between teams from the same function there shouldn't be any sort of sharing or that openness necessarily. Is there any, is being challenging?
Okay. Should we go? We could go back to the slide that gives us the kind of business model. So, do you want to take the data
sure.
question?
So I think traditionally, again, there's a lot of historic permissions set in local government, and certainly from an IT perspective, it's a pain. Ideally, in an ideal world, you'd use your Active Directory to manage that, but actually what you've got is 25, 30 years of legacy of you can only see this on a Tuesday, and on a Friday we'll allow you to see X, Y, and Z. And it's frustrating, not just from a technical perspective, but from being able to transact your business. And our chief exec has held kind of sessions with all the business, and that has come out as a key challenge or a barrier for us. And actually, from a data perspective, what we're locking down, we don't really need to. There are a lot of data sets that you do need to keep protected, but actually the majority should be open by default. And that makes people uncomfortable. Doesn't mean it's wrong, it just means that we're going to try and do something different.
And that's a big conversation at the moment.
It is a huge, and we're trying to draw up we are drawing up our digital strategy now, which has a huge leaning towards data. Some of the changes in the Digital Economy Bill will make things much easier when working with partners, but actually what we should do is trust our colleagues. We all have information security policies that are there to warrant against misuse of data. And what we should do is work much more collaboratively internally to make sure that our customer has the best experience. And the only way to do that is to share the data where we can and to stop being so protective. And I think in addition to that, an area I'm really, really keen to look at is how we share the data that we hold externally. So if we can, and the data is anonymous, we should be putting that data out there to allow our citizens to self-serve, to be able to go away and find the information they want, because that big data piece and around stopping those kind of contacts coming through will ultimately change how we interact with our customers in the future. So,
I think in a way that kind of echoes a lot of the conversations that are going around the organisation. If we really want to use the cloud, if we really want to use technology in a different way, what we can't do is try and control how we work with the technology. People have to change how they work. There has to be more trust, openness, less checking. People have to work very differently in order to get the best out of those technologies. So we're really at the heart of that conversation about cultural change. And it's easy to say the words, but it's hand-to-hand combat. I think that's what we kind of find,
It is, yeah.
because it's about changing thinking. And we are lucky at Wokingham in that our chief executive is so interested in this and so interested in this change at the moment that we get to see him weekly. I say lucky, so sometimes that doesn't go so well for us, but really that's kind of where we are at the moment. And it's really kind of trying to push the boundaries of that thinking. And we don't think that will be easy.
No,
at
not
all.
at all.
But really we've got that opportunity. Yes. Yeah.
You talked about a lot of the technology side of things, really. So
Mm.
I'm quite interested in more sort of the OD side. So
Yeah.
what have you done with organisation development, in terms of, in my experience, a lot of councils offer training programs on how to use Microsoft Excel,
Yeah.
which are useful, if not we should be,
Mm.
if you've got like a program for training staff to work in those different ways and to start thinking about using these and, that kind of support in
Mm.
place for the non-tech.
I think we have to, and that's a
Yeah.
key part of the programme. There's a whole L&D element to this programme, which looks at one of the areas where we've had some real problems with one of our major systems is because we launched a programme for our ERP, put it live without any training. And what you get, you kind of reap what you sow. And I think we as an organisation have learned from that. We can't do that to our staff again, because it decreases our productivity. But also what we need to be able to do is bring people with us. It's not about introducing tech out into the business that is so space-aged that it just puts people off. And I think what we need to do is drip feed this. And we're already starting doing some of that now. So what we're making the most of is wireframing things, so we can start to put out to our users to say, this is coming, we're going to make some changes now, what do you think? Let's get your feedback. But in addition to that, we have to be really open and really sensitive, I think, as well, to understand what really makes our staff feel uncomfortable and how we really get to the nub of that problem and start to make some changes. I'm not sure a few videos on how to use Microsoft's going to cut it.
No.
I think I really like the idea of what Mike said earlier, having that kind of digital help come and sit with us, ask the question. And what we must do from a cultural perspective really is to say it's okay that you don't know. And that's really difficult and really different to be able to say I don't understand, and actually be able to come on and start to ask those questions, not just to IT, but to colleagues or to your manager and things like that within the business.
You're absolutely right to raise that, and it's going to be one of the biggest challenges. And I think we have got more thinking to do there, because the whole of this model relies on our staff moving away from a kind of we'll tell you how to use it type approach to IT to this kind of approach we have in our everyday lives with IT. When it upgrades, it upgrades. If something goes wrong, you go on Google, you work it out yourself, you kind of self-help, and you kind of need those skills across the workforce. And that isn't going to be easy to embed, because a lot of people come from that kind of traditional local authority kind of, well, if I have some classroom training, maybe that will work for me kind of approach. Jeff?
Building on that organisational development point, I think this is a change management exercise enabled by technology.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the biggest challenge, as I see it, is turkeys and crispies. It's what Mike said earlier. You're asking for a skill set,
Mm-hmm.
and actually, because I'm going to do myself out of the job.
Yeah.
And the question for me is, how do you put people in a position where they feel confident to say, you don't need my old role anymore?
Mm.
So it is a skill set you need to nurture. But how do you tell people it's safe for them to do that?
I'll tell you what. I was going to give the example, because
Go for it, yeah.
we're just in our kind of in-source technology team. We're going through kind of exactly that in a kind of microcosm for the program. That we're moving that team now into a kind of implementation team, and we've done a lot of work with them to try and explain where the council's going to and where the future is. But we've got to the point now where we've kind of opened up a load of opportunities, new role opportunities, and we've put nearly 60% of them at risk. So we're right in that process now of having that conversation. This isn't about you guys maybe not having a job, but it is about you guys understanding how the council wants to use its technology, and it's how we talk about what behaviours and attitudes and approaches you have with that in order to secure a role in that new organisation. So that's kind of scary, but alongside of that, we're giving people a lot of support. And what we're actually finding is that people kind of skills and attributes that we didn't see before are starting to come to the fore. We spent a lot of time working on an apprentice scheme. I'll definitely come to you on an apprentice scheme. So we're trying to change that age profile. Sally's worked hard also around graduates, bringing graduates in to what we're doing. So there's a kind of whole package there in IT that we're trying to make that change and give people the opportunities.
And I don't think we can make light of what that kind of real challenge will be. And what I was going to use was the example, Matt and I will be in the same position. So part of this process that we'll go through, well, actually, we will need to say that we don't see ourselves in this model. And it's not because we don't have roles in it yet, we just don't know what those roles will be. And it will be a challenge, and it is a challenge. But I think it's, without wanting to sound really twee, it's been able to say that we feel valued and also we feel empowered and listened to within the business. And you hope that the skill set that you're showing and the behaviours that you're showing will hopefully lead to other things. But I do absolutely agree. And when Mike said it today, it really struck a chord with me to say you need to be as aggressive as possible in your own mind to be able to say, it might put me out of a job when this implementation team, but actually in some ways, if it delivers what it should deliver for the council, things move on, careers change. So it is being able to have that kind of foresight, I think.
So definitely, Jeff, I think leadership is managers in organisations going through change like this need to be able to say, well, actually, I might not stay with the organisation, but I'm passionate about this change, so I'm going to lead it, and I think that's okay. You know, sorry, you were desperate for a question, weren't you?
The insourcing, where you draw the line, because there's been a lot of shift towards outsourcing that's very outdated. And it seems to be a shift in, but the skills are different. What you're bringing in appears to be different. Is it about application skills like the SAPs?
I think it's a mix. I think, as Matt said, it's a mixed bag. We've got some fantastic people who have been with, I think, Wokingham were outsourced for 15 years. And actually, they've been with various different outsourced departments, companies, and they've got the right skill set and the right attitude, and they are absolutely up for the change. I think in addition to that, one of the really key points for us in the learning is that we need to grow our own. And it's recognising that if someone's got some skill sets here, they've worked in a GIS type web environment, actually we can train them up. Working with Microsoft, we were able to get them trained on Dynamics, and we've started to roll that kind of training out to all of our IT people who have traditionally done app-based pieces. We're starting to train some of our service desk guys on SharePoint. And I think, as Matt said, it's been able to say, if you put your hand up and show that kind of that want to get those opportunities, we can train people in those technologies. It's not about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It really is about investing in our people and growing that resource internally, rather than constantly trying to bring in agency workers.
There's a choice
Yeah.
of where what you have insourced and what you give to other experts externally. That's the sort of boundary.
It is, and my kind of advice there is that always have a blended approach, but you kind of have to know your local environment, really, what skills you need, where you've got them, where you haven't, what outside expertise you need to bring in for that. I mean, we definitely have that kind of relationship with Shaping Cloud. You know, they support our in-source teams and bring some of those skills along. But it definitely is a blend, but the exact kind of recipe to that blend, I think you kind of have to think about what it is you want to do locally and how that works, I think. Yeah, another.
So I'm just going to come back to Jeff's point.
Yeah, that's good.
I think one of the ways to help staff with this change is about focusing on the user needs and then showing them doing user research. GDS have this policy that all staff should see 2 hours of user research every 6 weeks. And that's really interesting that when you actually start showing people out in the services that that they're struggling to do stuff online or to engage with services, and then start showing them delivering services in a better way, and but also that if this change will enable the staff they've got to work in other areas and deliver the specialist skills that you have to focus on that, rather than wasting time rekeying information in. I think, yeah, sort of taking them through that process and really keeping the focus on the people out there that are actually using the services and how
Yeah.
Just a question, I suppose, and for yourselves and possibly the previous speakers. It's around, I suppose, some of the things I picked up is that sometimes it can actually be the politics of an organisation that's actually the most difficult thing to change and actually achieve transformation. I guess it's also an observation that I still think there's, within a lot of organisations, a traditional view of IT, which is the tin wires, effectively. I guess it was just about whether you've experienced any challenges with kind of trying to position yourselves in that new IT role, that's the new role of IT within the organisation, whether there's also been any developing that sort of trust that the new IT department can deliver on that, but also whether or not there's been any sort of stepping on toes with other areas of the organisation.
Loads.
Traditionally
Loads,
been more focused on kind of strategy and transformation and new ways of working. And just sort of what challenges you've experienced that you had.
I think we've disrupted a lot of service, but I think what we also did as well, I think the biggest change for us from a typical traditional IT department was merging customer services and IT together when Mike was at the helm, because those two departments coming together really started to make that massive difference. We were able to start recognising how customers function, and starting to make the voice of the customer heard with an absolute solid underpin of how technology could make some of those changes. And I think, as Matt said, have we stepped on toes? Absolutely. But I think what we also have done is put the groundwork in. So we invested very heavily in that business partnership model. So we, as a business, before we brought the IT back in-house, we're absolutely about listening to our customers. So we've done my BlackBerry doesn't work, my BlackBerries were in, can you just fix it for me? And actually spending some small amount of time getting trust, as I said earlier, really starts to build that reputation, and you can move on that and start to build those bonds and understand. And for Matt and I, neither of us are born into IT, so I come from Revs and Bens. Matt was a social worker.
Yeah.
So for us, we've been able to, when we talk about housing or about revenues or about benefits or planning, we can give real life examples. And I think that's really important when you're starting to do digital transformation, that you've got some pedigree around services to be able to really understand and start to be able to be empathetic with the business that you
There's
work
definitely that bit about trust, but also we're in that kind of perfect storm, I guess, for us now, in that there is no plan B. For this to work, for us to improve services, technology has to facilitate, support that change. There is no plan B, so we have to be at the heart of what we're doing. The only other reality is what people have kind of experienced a bit, which is, oh well, we'll sweat our assets, we'll cut back here, we'll have less of this, we'll have less people to help with IT, and then people's experience then between their home lives and what happens at the council just starts to go like that. So we're kind of lucky from that point of view, those environmental factors are in our favour. People have to come and talk to us, as well as trusting us, of course.
Of course, trust us. I'm conscious of time. I don't know how long we've got.
I know.
If there's more questions,
There's a couple here. I think, were you? I'm just trying to. Yeah, we need some kind of ticketing system.
There must be a microphone.
Just trying to be fair,
from the planning spectrum, household,
Oh yeah, household planning applications. Yeah.
conventions, failing that. Just a little bit about what you've done to study that nature, how it's changed as a result.
Yeah.
So, how much failure did you have?
Quite a lot.
How much do we still have?
How much do we
still
still have?
lots.
I think we need to caveat what we're talking about today is that we're starting on this journey. So we've made some fantastic areas of improvement. Certainly from a waste perspective, we used to collect. Well, we do collect. Not used to. We still do. We collect revenue for our garden waste service, and we used to go out there and say you need to pay. and customers would pay at some point. And as part of introducing Dynamics, we went into an invoicing process, integrating our ERP with Dynamics, allow people to go on, do this online. And in the first year that it launched on Dynamics, we took all of the money we would normally collect in 9 months within 4 to 6 weeks. And in addition to that, we've seen the step from people wanting to come in and pay or pay by cheque absolutely decrease and start to pay online. So we've seen some of that change in the way people want to interact with us. From a demand perspective, replacing the technology system saw what that demand, that failure demand was like, because you actually had the measurements. And as our lead politician will say, if you don't measure it, you can't manage it. And it's absolutely critical for us in this new world that we start to have those KPIs and a real dashboard effect, which is why we're starting to just work on those proof of concepts with Power BI, to start to be able to get all of that information real time now to the hands of not only of our politicians, but to the business and our contractors. So.
But there's still lots there.
There's still
I mean,
lots.
in that session around household planning applications, you could just see the amount of wasted time and effort that specialist people were doing, just because of the number of kind of contacts people will have to try and find out what's going on with their planning application. You can see how this model would just take that take that away. But obviously, what it will also take away is the number of specialists the council needs too, because that's how that will work. Sorry, yeah.
Duncan Dewhurst, I'm CIO at Lewisham Council. I thought it was a brilliant presentation, and I love the way you've sort of pulled it all together on this slide and the challenges you're facing and trying to get that specialisation of different roles within the council. I think we've done some similar things in Lewisham using Dynamics to run a number of services like waste, for example. I'd just be really interested in your take on how you're planning to approach this in social care.
Yeah.
Particularly with your background as a social worker.
Yeah.
I mean, actually,
I mean, their processes.
whisper
I mean,
it quietly, but I think quite a lot of what social workers do could be broken up in some of those ways. I don't think we've always got the right people doing the right things in the right areas. And I'd just be interested in your take on how you're going to have that, or how you have that.
I mean, actually, Sally probably talk about that, because that particular workshop I was in Greece for, which I was pleased about. But the children's services one was really, really interesting, wasn't it?
It was, and we had some really forward-thinking practitioners there. On one hand, they wanted to be using Link or Scout for Business to be able to have, where you're having multi-agency conversations, we can have them immediately. What we found is that a lot of social workers are trying to bring people together to have those conversations, and a lot of the steps we take could be automated or could be done differently by different elements of the organisation. So whilst they were wanting tablets to be able to use their Three Houses app out in the field, they also said, please don't take my Nokia 5110 off me, that's indestructible, because I don't want a smartphone, I just want a bit of kit that I can make a call on. But actually what we're trying to get to with social workers is using things like phablets and things like that out in the business. But for us, they weren't opposed to this, and actually I think when you sit down and talk to social workers, they want to spend the time with the children or the adults that they're looking after. And actually what they feel is that they're spending a lot of time doing the swivel chair, absolutely. So they're going out into the community, they're writing things down. They don't really mind how we improve it, as long as we improve it, whether that be voice recognition, whether that's being able to type straight into their system, their line of business system out in the field. They don't mind, as long as we can do something that takes away that overhead of administration, which I'm sure is not just felt in social services, but across the board.
And with adults, the conversation really is about trying to help them understand how to kind of separate out their kind of processes, because actually the model fits quite nicely. But you have to come from that space, which is, this is about enabling you as a specialist to kind of be a specialist. Some of those other things we need to kind of take away and use technology to kind of do that. So there's a whole conversation with them about that. Of course, the kind of bigger conversation locally is about how they integrate with health, and then how you can kind of apply the model across some of those health teams and some of those integrated teams. And that's quite a difficult conversation, but I do think there's an opportunity, because I think the model applies, the technology applies. It's just about whether those organisations share that vision and are willing to kind of work in that kind of standardised way, and that's tricky. Sorry, Nate.
Supplement that one,
Yeah.
actually. Good question.
Yeah.
What is the appetite within the business, within the organisation for, yes, you can see that it can improve things, but I'm assuming at the moment they're on a big legacy software, social care software piece of issue.
Yeah.
Now, it's a huge risk to get that wrong.
Mm.
If it falls over, that's one of the
I'd
big
agree.
risk worries of members and chief execs dying on their watch, mentioned.
Yeah.
What's the response you're getting at that level?
So as Matt said, out of the 115 apps we have, there will be some key ones that we wouldn't replace.
Yeah.
Well, no. I shouldn't say that. It's not that we wouldn't replace it. We might replace it with a different system that was future-proof from our perspective. I agree that there are some products that you just need, and actually, we are replacing our social care system.
Definitely. I mean,
Not on Dynamics?
No.
No, but you're replacing it with another.
yeah.
Yes.
Now,
That
some
falls
of
into
some of
future.
the processes that happen in social care, people might do on Dynamics, integrated back into that line of business system. And certainly we've had conversations, Carlos talked about Spinner and how that might help out there. So it's not kind of one or the other. And we will push Dynamics as far in as we can there. But I don't think for those key bits of the council's business to say we're going to have no back office systems for any of you, I think would be too big a leap. But going from 115 to 35 is a sensible big rationalisation step. Sally she's
I
just
could reel them off.
application Sally.
I'll stop quickly. So
Yeah, everyone's like kind of gathering. Is it lunch?
It's lunchtime. You should be telling us. To be
Yeah.
fair. So some of our biggies. So Flair APP for planning is going to remain, and Revs and Bends is another biggie, and then social care. They're the ones that I would talk about is the real kind of top ones we need to keep. And then there's a plethora of other applications, smaller apps that we would use. So a GIS solution, for example, a telephony solution. I'm trying to remember the slide, but all of those kind of applications that showed on there, plus a plethora of others. So.